Good morning and welcome to today's daily reflection. Now, for once, I'm going to have to ignore the readings set for today, especially the Gospel readings, because we have just come through the Christmas story. Reflecting on the beginning of the Easter story seems a bit out of place. So, as we have just had Epiphany with the story of the supposedly three wise men, I want to share the story of the fourth wise man. He was supposedly called Artaban. Now, the Magi were all in touch with one another, and through their study of the heavens, had been expecting the appearance of a new star in the east, signifying the birth of a great new prince. They had decided that when the star appeared, they should all set off for an agreed meeting place, and from there they would travel on together to visit the new king and pay homage to him. All were to take gifts. Artaban's was very special indeed. To make the trip, he sold everything he owned, put his money into 3 jewels, a sapphire, a ruby, and most precious of all, a pearl. These would be the gifts he would give to the king when he came face to face with him. In due course, the star appeared, and, like the others, Artaban set off for the rendezvous. But on the way, he came across a sick man by the roadside. Being a doctor, and like the Good Samaritan in the parable, he could not pass by on the other side. Instead, he stopped to help, which delayed him. So, when he reached the meeting place, the other wise men had already gone on without him. Determined to catch up, he sold the sapphire to buy a train of fast camels to carry him quickly across the desert. But sadly, again, he was too late. When he eventually reached Bethlehem, the whole town was in uproar. Mary and Joseph, with Jesus, had fled to Egypt, because Herod had given the order that all the boys under the age of 2 were to be killed to get rid of this new prince. Artaban was an eyewitness to this massacre, and at one point he came across a group of soldiers about to tear a small boy from his mother's arms. Artaban hurried over to stop them. Eventually they agreed to let the mother and child go in return for the ruby. So he journeyed on. He came across a group of outcasts, lepers. As a doctor, he couldn't leave them. But one day became a week, then a month, and the years piled up. Artaban ceased his search. He had found a life among the lepers, yet he kept the pearl in the pouch, just in case. One day, another Magi from Persia found the camp. He was travelling to Jerusalem with his daughter, and brought news of the death of Artaban's father, and tried to encourage him to return home. Of course, he refused. By now, this was his home after 30-odd years. Stories started to circulate in the camp of a prophet who had the power of God to heal people. He was in Jerusalem. A young blind man who lived in the camp went to see if the stories were true, desperate to be touched by this prophet. When he arrived in Jerusalem, palm branches were being waved by the people in the streets as the man they called Jesus arrived. Unable to get near Jesus, he hurried back to the camp and told what he had heard to Artaban. At last his journey appeared to be over, but by this time he was in ill health. He made the journey to Jerusalem anyway with his pearl. As he arrived in the city, he discovered that Jesus had been arrested, was about to be crucified. He reasoned that with the pearl he could buy Jesus his freedom. So off he went. But along the way he met another tragedy. The business his fellow Magi from Persia had come to start had failed. He had been killed, and his daughter was being sold into slavery to pay for his debts. He had nothing left but the pearl, and while it hurt him to do so, he offered the pearl as payment for his friend's debts, so the daughter could go free. Once again he had missed the Saviour, and for now Jesus would be dead. It was too late. So he headed back, mourning for the man he had never met, broken-hearted beyond measure, and already ailing because his heart was beginning to fail. So he stopped to rest. While someone went to get him water, someone stood in front of him, almost out of nowhere. Immediately he knew this was Jesus. "Saviour," he said, "I've looked for you so long. And now that you are here, I have nothing to give you. The precious stones I brought are gone. Nothing. I have nothing." But Jesus looked at him very kindly and said, "My son, you gave me everything. When I was thirsty, you gave me a drink. When I was sick, you healed me. When I was homeless, you took me into your home. When I was imprisoned, you visited me." Artaban was puzzled. "My Lord, I have never seen you before. When did I do these things for you?" Jesus then reached out, touched the Magi who lay dying before him, and said, "Whatever you did for the least of those brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me." And then he was gone. For a moment, Artaban looked at the place where Jesus had stood, closed his eyes, and died. Fully aware that those 30 years had not been in vain, fully aware that he had served his Lord, and now, finally, fully, he was at peace. He was buried back at the camp that had been his home for so long. There is a saying, "Often goes the Christ in Saviour's guise." It is only to those like Artaban who have found Christ by serving others that the Lord will say, "Truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me." Well, I hope you enjoyed that story. Much of it we can relate to our own lives if we let it. But in the meantime, enjoy what's left of this week. Try and stay safe. Be good. And if you can, keep smiling. Bye for now.